Welcome to First. I'm Shirley Min along with Nichelle Polston and Mark Eichman. The Delaware Child Predator Task Force is busier than ever as technology increases. This week, a look at how investigators are trying to win the war against dangerous predators online and in real life.
Wilmington is trying to change the citizen approach to crime. A new message has been rolled out to cure the violence.
We've been told over and over that the cure for terrorism is to report anything suspicious. Coordinating that information is key. This week, a look at how some groups are doing just that. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
Online child pornography is an ever-growing problem nationwide and here in Delaware, particularly as technology advances. This fiscal year, Delaware received $310,000 in federal and state money to run the Delaware Child Predator Task Force. And in our first look, we explain why the unit is poised to get even more help from the state. Delaware's Child Predator Task Force executes one search warrant a week. That's more than any other police agency in the state.
We could probably execute a search warrant a day every week and still have cases to develop.
Deputy Attorney General Abby Rogers-Layton heads up the unit, partnering with state and local police.
We are proud of everything that we have accomplished together.
Attorney General Beau Biden created the task force 7 years ago as part of a federal push cracking down on internet crimes against children. The unit's 4 investigators work undercover, proactively seeking out predators lurking online to meet children. They also work reactively, responding to tips. But as social media and technology develops, Layton says there's a growing trend of child predators who are no longer just sharing photos, but are taking it a step further.
What has happened is as the internet has grown, they have more ability to reach out and interact with children. These people are grooming these children for relationships, friendships to start, but for the purposes of ultimately having sexual contact with them.
From January of last year through the end of April, the Attorney General's office says of the 63 arrests it made, 11 included individuals charged with sexually abusing children. This growing problem prompted Biden and his team to make the pitch for a 5th investigator before the state's budget writers in February and Delaware's Office of Management and Budget before that.
Get some money to make sure our computers work, as well as making sure some more money for making sure we can protect kids. We'll get some money this year, I think.
The task force is also getting help from legislation that received unanimous support from the General Assembly. State Representative Deborah Heffernan sponsored House Bill 256 that makes it a chargeable offense to solicit a child or an undercover investigator playing the role of a child online.
What it does is it updates the laws that cover sexual solicitation of a minor to include new and all forms of electronic communication that could exist, and it also takes away the need for an actual meeting, whereas just setting up a meeting is enough to be the crime.
Layton says the measure also closes a loophole defendants have effectively taken advantage of in the past.
It eliminates the defense of a fantasy so that the offender cannot later say, as an affirmative defense, I was just pretending, I was never going to act on this relationship with this child. Once that offender has the conversation with the child, the crime has been committed.
Since 2007, the Child Predator Task Force has rescued 120 children who were actively abused or being groomed, and it's close to reaching the 200 conviction mark.
We see brutal acts of crimes being committed against children captured in video and images every single day of our life. But there's a cause, and we're fighting for the cause, and I think that helps a lot to know that you are protecting children and knowing that we are actively rescuing children.
I've been told the Joint Finance Committee approved a 5th investigator for the task force in the form of a 2nd prosecutor, funding for which will be in the budget bill that the General Assembly will pass next month. Right now, Abby Layton prosecutes all of the cases herself, so Mark, she'll have some help.
And Shirley, when we talk about child predators here in Delaware, you really can't not mention convicted child molester Earl Bradley.
And unfortunately, that is the case. And Abby Layton says, while there's absolutely nothing good to say about Bradley, who was serving life in prison, his case did open up a dialogue to speak more openly and honestly, warning parents that this sort of thing, this horrible thing, can happen right next door to you.
And it seems like you're hearing more and more about these cases. Is it because there's more of these people out there, or just technology makes it easier to find them?
Layton says it's a little bit of both, and if you think about it, there is a link between people who look at child pornography and who want to have sexual contact with children. And with everything that is available on the internet, Abby Layton says that explains why we are seeing and hearing about more instances of predators victimizing children. And
so as kids have more access to the internet and social media, I guess the bottom line rule of thumb is just watch what your kids are doing and be aware. All right, thanks a lot, Shirley. Additional stories about the task force can be found at newsworks.org/Delaware.
Coming up on First, the future of AstraZeneca and what it means to jobs in Delaware and the future of Big Pharma. Later, First Experience takes you beyond the potter's wheel to bring you some designer and some practical pieces of art.
Wilmington's crime pendulum could soon slow down as the city moves closer to implementing Cure Violence, a national crime prevention model in one of several neighborhood hotspots this summer. Its unique approach has even been attributed to the decrease of shootings in Chicago's toughest areas. But will the program see success here?
It's political, that's all it is. My son's dead.
Theodore Jackson Sr., still very distraught over the shooting death of his son, questions whether or not Cure Violence is the answer for Wilmington. In April, Mayor Dennis Williams, along with the national director of the program, surveyed the Hedgeville area as a potential place to implement the crime prevention model.
In this country, for the last several hundred years, we've looked at violence being in the realm of the criminal justice system. The challenge is not to separate the criminal justice, but to add on to the criminal justice system by looking at violence not from the suppression or criminal justice perspective, but to look at it from the health perspective.
Single gunshot wound right below the right.
The unique approach will bring mediators to hospitals in an effort to prevent shootings before they occur by talking to hospitalized shooting victims, especially those who draw up plans to retaliate while under medical care. And these mediators, also known as interrupters, will be very familiar with the streets.
A lot of them have possibly been to prison, possibly shot somebody, possibly been involved in a gang, possibly sold drugs, but now they're rejuvenating their lives. So we're going to use the same individuals that used to tear down the community to rebuild the community once again.
Sean Allen, who will run the program under the name Cease Violence Wilmington, says there will be 4 interrupters along with 6 outreach workers. The outreach workers, though, will have a different job.
When that individual talks to the victim and the victim agrees and say, listen, I'm tired of this lifestyle. I done got shot 3 times. What type of resources you have? Well, we got GED resources, we got employment resources, and I can connect you to them resources and give you a better way of life. This is where the outreach workers come in.
Wilmington peacekeeper Matthew Allen supports any plan to tackle crime. He recently held a rally against violence after his wife was shot by 2 stray bullets as she sat on her front porch with her grandson.
Our motto is 1 hour of doing something is better than 24 hours of doing nothing.
The couple's grandson was unharmed in the shooting that hits too close to home for the Allens, who are willing to help the mayor in the fight against crime.
Whatever he wants us to do to help cure this violence in the city of Wilmington, we will do it.
Bottom line, Wilmington leaders and residents all agree something has to be done.
I think people need to sit down and do some real calculations of budgeting and numbers, and I think they would really say that, maybe it's time for us to take another look at the way we do things, because it's so much money that the taxpayers are spending.
And Cease Violence Wilmington may very well be the answer. In fact, the mayor says the community will also need to actively take a stand and report crime.
People are scared. They have to live here. When they tell on somebody, they got to go back in their homes. Something has to be done.
People may not think that their job or their philosophy should be to help these folks, but on the back end, we're still paying.
Cease Violence Wilmington will be implemented on the north side and west side of the city. Roughly $200,000 will go into the program. Mediators and outreach workers are expected to be hired and trained by June and will hit the streets by July 1st.
Local law enforcement officials do have their hands full with the everyday crimes, but they also form part of a regional team aimed at protecting people from acts of terrorism and active shooter threats. Staying on the cutting edge in technology is vital for law enforcement. A recent meeting among such groups shows how they combat the latest threats. Earlier this month, Dover Air Force Base went on full lockdown after some suspicious activity was reported. The lockdown backed up traffic heading into the base gates. And while reports that there was an active shooter on site turned out not to be true, base security spent several hours double-checking just to be sure. After the Boston Marathon bombing, another shooting earlier this year at Fort Hood in Texas, and all too frequent school shooting incidents, these days law enforcement leaders aren't taking anything suspicious for granted.
It's important for people to understand that we run everything down. If we get 1,000 leads and 999 out of those 1,000 turn out to be nothing, that's okay. That's what we get paid for, and we do it for that one. If we're able to prevent one attack, then that's the key for us.
Last week, Wilmington University hosted a training session for police and other security leaders. The training included members of InfraGard, a group dedicated to improving the sharing of information to protect the state's critical infrastructure.
InfraGard is an organization that mainly caters to, we'll say, most of the professionals, the corporations within the Delaware Valley. And they come to us for training, for knowledge, to get the latest threat assessments.
Cooperation is key to preventing attacks, says Ed Guthrie, who heads up Delaware's InfraGard chapter.
And the slightest thing, as the previous presenter said, it may seem inconsequential to you, but it may be just one piece of the puzzle that someone else across the street in their agency is looking for.
That need to exchange information extends to the public as well.
Far too often we see that when an attack or something happens and those subsequent reports of neighbors, of other individuals that knew that person said, I suspected something but didn't want to go forward.
Even in cases like earlier this month at Dover Air Force Base, where the suspicious activity turned out to be nothing, investigators don't mind running down any and all leads.
And we'd rather have that awareness, and we're okay with those false reports because that means that people are looking out and people are more hypervigilant, not paranoid, hypervigilant, and then we appreciate that.
If you happen to see something in your community that's suspicious, report it to your local police. Don't hesitate to do it. You're not bothering anyone. If you see something, and say something. Our safety in our communities it's a responsibility we all bear.
Sometimes it is hard to know whether something that's out of the ordinary rises to the level of suspicious activity, but officials say that's something you should let the professional investigators determine. You can report anything suspicious to the State Police Anti-Terrorism Tip Line at 1-800-FORCE-12.
You're always invited to watch First online when you want. This show is available on Monday. Past shows are at WHYY.org/first right now. You can also watch us with Comcast On Demand. Click through the Get Local, News and Information, and the PBS WHYY tabs to find us.
The final month of work for members of the Delaware General Assembly is right around the corner, so what better time for State of Play? Here with me once again, Stephanie Hansen, former Newcastle County Council President, now with the law firm of Young, Conaway, Stargett, and Taylor. Also here is Michael Stafford. He's an attorney and syndicated columnist whose work has been featured on MSNBC. Well, as the Joint Finance Committee takes the next week or so now to complete their work on marking up the governor's budget, any surprises in the changes we've seen so far? I guess a decrease in Markell's proposed pay increase for state workers was going to be a 1% bump up, now just $500, I guess, kind of across the board. Surprise?
I don't think it was a surprise when we began to hear rumors that the projections, the DFAC projections, were going to be lower than we thought. So, you know, state workers, unfortunately, it seems like they always take a hit. And, you know, we can debate the politics of that, but it's not a surprise.
Right, I would agree with that. I mean, it's not a surprise. When you look at the revenue projections coming in lower, they've got to cut money somewhere.
And we're also talking clean water fee, which is a sort of revenue generator, kind of the opposite of a spending cut, still waiting to get through. And in recent weeks, DNREC Secretary Colin O'Mara announced his plans to leave the state to head up the National Wildlife Federation in D.C. Kind of a last push here for Secretary O'Mara to get this done before he leaves in July?
Maybe so. I think probably it's more of a push by the governor. And particularly you can tell that with the new, the choice for the new secretary, which is Dave Small, who has been with DNREC for a long time. I think by choosing Dave Small, who's been really kind of the deputy secretary for many, many years, it sends a message of consistency. We're still on point. Here's somebody that's been involved in the process for a long time that's on point with the water tax and everything.
I certainly don't think that the water tax is a done deal. I mean, I think we all agree that it's many of the projects that would go to fund are necessary. I mean, we know, NASA just a couple of weeks ago with a report about the Antarctic glaciers, we know we're going to be facing sea level rise. We have insurers beginning to sue local governments who haven't taken measures to address those kind of issues. So it's targeting necessary things. But I don't think there's a lot of political will right now.
Maybe we'll see a small water tax because it's still going. I bet you it's going to rain. It's going to rain in June. People are going to continue to see problems with flooding and stormwater management. It's going to stay on people's minds. I think if anything, we get part of a small water tax.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe Cleveland gets the first round. Oh, that happened the other. So I hate to bet. You never know. The odds can be long, but I tend to agree with Stephanie. I mean, I think we're going to see something. I think it's going to be a small water tax. I think the gas tax just hits people in a larger way in their pocketbooks, and it's something they're going to think about every time they're at the pump. I think there's less support for that, particularly since we've had so much transportation and road infrastructure spending in the past.
Is there anything Governor Markell can do as the leader of a small state in this massive deal to preserve those jobs if Pfizer does take over AstraZeneca?
That's hard to say. I mean, at the state government level, when you look at what Pfizer would probably do if that sale did go through, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, now it looks like we've gotten a reprieve, right, at least for the moment. Why would Pfizer keep a headquarters here when they can move to back to England? They can move those jobs, consolidate, move back to England. I don't see that deal happening in a way that doesn't involve significant job losses for the state, no matter what the Markell administration does.
Correct. And it's all about taxes, where they can get a better tax deal. So, here we are talking about DFAC saying that our revenue is down and they're cutting state workers. I don't see the governor being able to effectuate a positive change with regard to taxes and how that might affect AstraZeneca in order to be able to really stop anything.
All right, we'll keep closely watching it, and we will have more on the AstraZeneca saga that's coming up next on First. But for now, thanks to our State of Players, Stephanie Hansen and Michael Stafford. Thanks for being here on State of Play. And you can watch this interview at newsworks.org/Delaware. Click the drop-down box at the top of the page.
The battle over AstraZeneca seems to change every day. To find out the latest, we invite you to check out our coverage on newsworks.org/Delaware. To take a bigger picture approach on what this means to the Delaware economy and to Big Pharma in general, we bring in Alana Gordon. She's a member of the Pulse team on WHYY-FM and joins us now on First. Hi, Alana.
Hi, Shirley. We're talking about Pfizer's proposed bid to take over AstraZeneca, and that company has a big footprint here. No matter what the outcome of this merger, it speaks to the broad and powerful changes taking place in the pharmaceutical sector. AstraZeneca is known for drugs like Crestor for cholesterol. It's a British company, but its U.S. headquarters are right off of Highway 202 in Wilmington. The company also has a production plant in Newark.
Their impact, when you consider their salaries for those 2,600 employees and then the services they purchase, are approximately $650 million total gross domestic product in the state. So direct and indirect financial impact on the state. So it's a big impact.
Alan Levin, Delaware's Economic Development Director, says the state courted AstraZeneca to settle into Wilmington in the late 90s.
It wasn't just the money, I think, for AstraZeneca. I think it more or less was the attention that they got.
AstraZeneca is getting a lot of attention again these days. Pfizer, based in New York, offered more than $100 billion for the company.
Pfizer's bid is really, I think, an epitome of what's going on in the industry.
George Chrysanthis from the Fox School of Business in Philadelphia says major changes in big pharma have been driving waves of mergers and downsizing. Pfizer previously took over Wyeth and Pharmacia. AstraZeneca already has reduced its workforce locally by more than half. The companies are scrambling to build a more promising drug pipeline, as many of their current top-selling drugs are coming off of patent protection and facing generic competition.
Pfizer and AstraZeneca are less companies in the sense of sales than they were a few years ago. Why? As part of the challenges, a lot of patent expiration of top-name drugs.
For Pfizer, that's meant Lipitor. For AstraZeneca, Nexium, and a whole lot more. Chrysanthis, who used to work at AstraZeneca, says the big pharma companies have plucked the low-hanging fruit, those blockbuster drugs for common conditions. Now, companies must sharpen their focus. But drug development costs more and takes longer than before. So big pharma is shelving a lot of early research projects. They're investing instead in therapies further along the pipeline, ones that show the most promise. Chrysanthis says AstraZeneca has some real strengths in this area, which creates the value that attracted Pfizer.
AstraZeneca, for example, has some very exciting immuno-oncology projects in early phase 1 and phase 2.
Merger or not, the company faces a lot of uncertainty. Only about 1 in 10 therapies that reach the clinical stage actually make it to market. But big pharma's worries can produce opportunities for smaller, more agile companies.
Almost every big pharmaceutical companies you can name of are our clients.
Ben Shu is with QPS, based out of the Delaware Technology Park in Newark. It's part of a growing sector of contract research organizations.
When I joined the company, it was less than 100 people. Now it's over 1,100.
QPS has expanded as big companies look to outsource research services and clinical trials to reduce costs.
Our work, the impact is quite significant, and our sponsors' drug got approved will eventually affect people's life, their health.
Companies have also emerged as offshoots from the industry. Others are growing. Insight, based in Wilmington, is one example that focuses on rare cancers. It's expected to employ 600 plus people by the end of the year.
That's a big deal. So there are places for these individuals to go.
Whatever happens with AstraZeneca, a tide of challenge, opportunity, and uncertainty will keep sweeping over Delaware's biotech and pharma sectors.
Ilana, what does this mean for research?
Research, there's a lot of challenges, like I said, and opportunities. So a lot of that early basic research, big pharma doesn't want to get into that anymore, because when you think about it, an idea to market for a product, it's like 1 in 1,000 make it through, or in clinical phase 1 in 10. So you've got this kind of sprouting up of a biotech sector, these small companies working on different research. You also have things when big pharma wants to shelve a product. Let's take not quite pharma, but something like DuPont. In the case of Gore-Tex, they didn't want to develop that. You have somebody taking that product, Bill Gore, and spinning it off and seeing it grow.
Other pharma companies, Merck, GlaxoSmithKline in our area, what does all this mean for them?
A lot of these companies are going through the same issues that Pfizer and AstraZeneca are in terms of their drugs falling off of this patent cliff. You have companies like Merck. They announced last year a whole global restructuring, a downsizing of 20% of their workforce.
All right, a lot of changes headed our way. Thank you, Ilana Gordon. You can follow reporting on this story on newsworks.org/Delaware. Radio reporting can be found on WHYY-FM 90.9. Ilana is also a member of the Pulse team, and that broadcast is heard Fridays at 9 a.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. on 90.9. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, we need to mention that AstraZeneca is a sponsoring underwriter of the Pulse.
On First Experience this week, we meet 2 artists who first met as pen pals through a ceramics magazine. For over 20 years, Paul and Tanya Romanek have been bringing their talents together to make pottery an art form. Check out what keeps them going after all these years. You'll find that there is more to pottery than just bowls and platters.
My husband and I are ceramic artists. We both started
in pottery in the 80s, and we both have very specific talents. My husband Paul is more talented on the potter's wheel, and then I do all of the hand building, adding handles, adding trees to the pieces. I'm inspired a lot by nature. I love to do a lot of animals, trees, leaves, fish.
Tanya and I have something we call Potter's Time, because when you're busy and you're involved and you're immersed in your work, you forget and you lose track of the time. It could be a 3-hour piece, or it could be pieces that we've spent 50 or 60 hours on. I know that I've created over 30,000 pieces on a potter's wheel now in the last 20 years, and while I'm creating it is the most gratifying part of the process.
I learn from the clay how to attach, for instance, a handle on a piece, or how something is going to hang on the wall balanced. I know really from trial and error what that clay will do. So these are things that just come with years of experience working with the material. You know what that material will and won't do.
I love creating the pieces on the wheel. It's wonderful to be recognized and to be able to create something with your own hands and then have somebody interested that wants to buy that from you. And that, I think, is what helps to feed the energy to make you want to do more.
It's nice when people come in, they start looking at the pottery. I'll hear them say, I love your colors, I love the shapes. I know then that they really appreciate what we do. They get it. Those are the kind of things that make me feel good when I'm in the gallery talking about Paul and I's work.
As we evolved and our business evolved from making bowls and platters, we had to reinvent ourselves. And when a local brewing company challenged me to see if I could make a growler with a flip top on it, it took me a few prototypes to figure it out. But very shortly thereafter, we realized that we had a hit on our hands. It was exciting. It's sort of a double sword, because on one hand, all the dedication and time that went into that piece, I want to keep sometimes, and then when it's gone, you'll never see that piece again, but it's what I learned from that piece that I take with me to the next project or to the next piece that I do, and that's what feeds my energy to want to go back and make more because of the reward I get from seeing the completion of my work.
We really feed off of one another's talents. That's what's really, I guess, kept us going here for 20 years. Our love of the art, it's what we do. I don't know what we would do if we weren't in the clay.
Both Twin Lakes Brewing and Dogfish Head Beer sell growlers made by Romanik Pottery. This is the finished 3-gallon growler Tanya was working on in our story. Interested in learning how to make pottery yourself? You can find information on that along with gallery hours, or you can order custom pieces when you visit their website, romanikpottery.com.
Next week on First, Delaware Congressman John Carney is here in our studios. We'll discuss the latest happenings in Congress and how they relate to us here in Delaware.
And we'll have that interview and more on the next First. You've been watching First, your Delaware news magazine. We thank you for watching. For Nichelle Polston, Ilana Gordon, and Mark Eichman, I'm Shirley Min. Have a great week and enjoy your Memorial Day holiday.